My friends, I need you to put down whatever you're doing and listen to me carefully. What I discovered 3 days ago changed everything I thought I understood about what's coming next. And if you care about your family's future, about the America we're leaving to our children, you cannot afford to miss what I'm about to share with you. Before we go any further, please hit that subscribe button right now and become a member of this community, because what we're discussing today will affect every single American, and the more people who understand this, the stronger we become together. Last Monday morning, I received a call that shook me to my core. The voice on the other end belonged to someone I hadn't heard from in years, someone who worked deep inside the highest levels of government. Their voice was shaking as they said 5 words that I'll never forget. Michelle, you need to know this. What they told me next revealed something that most Americans have no idea just happened. Something that was announced quietly, buried in legal language, hidden behind technical terms that most people would never think to look for. But once you understand what it really means, once you see the bigger picture, you'll realize why my hands were trembling as I took notes during that phone call. I want you to picture something with me. Imagine you're Maria, a working mother from Ohio. You're trying to pay your bills, help your kids with homework, maybe plan a small vacation for next summer. You watch the news occasionally, but most of the time you're focused on your family, your job, your daily life. And why shouldn't you be? You trust that there are people in government whose job it is to protect your interests, to make sure the system works for families like yours. But what if I told you that while Maria was living her life, trusting that democracy was working the way it's supposed to, decisions were being made that will fundamentally change what it means to be an American citizen? What if I told you that something was unveiled last week that gives one person more power over your daily life than any president in our history has ever had? The person who called me, I'll call them David to protect their identity, had access to documents that aren't supposed to exist. Recordings of conversations that were meant to stay secret forever. Evidence of planning that reaches back months, maybe years, all building toward the moment when this new power would be revealed to a small group of insiders, while the rest of America remained completely unaware. David played me an audio clip from a meeting that took place 2 weeks ago. I heard voices I recognized discussing something they called Project Reset. They weren't talking about policy changes or legislative initiatives. They were talking about fundamentally restructuring how power operates in America, and they were laughing about how easy it would be because most people wouldn't understand what was happening until it was too late to stop it. I've been in politics long enough to know when something feels different, when the normal rules don't apply anymore. But hearing those voices, hearing the casual way they discussed reshaping American democracy, that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. These weren't politicians debating policy. These were people treating the Constitution like a rough draft they could edit whenever it became inconvenient. Let me tell you about Dr. Elizabeth Santos, a constitutional law professor at Georgetown. I called her immediately after my conversation with David. Elizabeth has studied democratic institutions around the world, has written extensively about how democracies and when I described what I had learned, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, she said something that chilled me. Michelle, what you're describing sounds exactly like what happened in Hungary, in Poland, in places where democracy didn't collapse overnight, but was slowly, legally, systematically dismantled by people who understood how to use the system against itself. The power that was unveiled last week operates through executive orders, administrative procedures, and legal interpretations that most Americans will never hear about. It doesn't require congressional approval. It doesn't need a constitutional amendment. It simply redefines how existing laws are interpreted and enforced. And once it's fully implemented, it will give one person the ability to control aspects of American life that have always been beyond the reach of any single individual. I think about my daughters when I consider what this means. I think about the country they're growing up in, the freedoms they take for granted, the assumption that their rights are protected by institutions that are stronger than any one person's ambitions. What happens to that assumption when those institutions can be reshaped by administrative decree? David sent me a document that outlines the timeline for implementing this new power structure. Phase 1 has already begun, though most people interpreted it as routine administrative changes. Phase 2 is scheduled to start next month. again disguised as bureaucratic reorganization, but by the time we reach phase 3, the changes will be irreversible through normal democratic processes. The genius of this plan, if you can call something so destructive genius, is that each phase appears reasonable when viewed in isolation. New efficiency measures, streamlined decision-making, reduced bureaucratic delays. Who could argue with making government work better? But when you see all the phases together, when you understand how they connect and build on each other, you realize you're looking at a blueprint for consolidating power in ways the founders never intended. I've spoken to federal judges who are deeply concerned about what they're seeing, not because they disagree with specific policies, but because they recognize that the rule of law itself is being quietly redefined. One judge, someone who has served under both Republican and Democratic presidents, told me they'd never seen anything like this in 40 years on the bench. This judge, I'll call her Judge Williams, shared with me a memo that was circulated to federal courts last week. On the surface, it appeared to be routine guidance about case scheduling and administrative procedures, but buried in the technical language was something unprecedented, instructions that fundamentally alter how certain types of constitutional challenges can be heard and decided. Judge Williams explained it to me this way. Imagine if someone changed the rules of a game while you were playing it, but they did it so subtly that most players wouldn't notice until the game was over. That's what we're seeing here. The basic framework of constitutional law is being altered through administrative changes that most people, even most lawyers, won't understand until it's too late. I want you to understand the personal cost of what I'm sharing with you today. David, Dr. Santos, Judge Williams, all the people who have helped me understand what's happening, they're taking enormous risks. Their careers, their reputations, their safety, all of it is on the line because they believe you deserve to know what's being done in your name without your knowledge. That's the America I still believe in. The America where people risk everything to protect democratic principles. The America where citizens care more about truth than personal comfort. The America where ordinary people become heroes simply by refusing to stay silent when democracy is under threat. But I also want you to understand what we're up against. The power that was unveiled last week comes with a massive public relations operation designed to make you think everything is normal. You'll see carefully crafted statements about efficiency and modernization. You'll hear experts on television explaining why these changes are necessary and beneficial. You'll read editorials praising innovative approaches to governance. All of that is designed to keep you from asking the one question that matters most: who benefits when power becomes more concentrated, less accountable, less responsive to the will of the people? I think about Maria from Ohio again. 3 months from now, she might notice that certain services aren't available anymore, that processes that used to be straightforward have become complicated, that her voice as a citizen seems to carry less weight than it used to. But she won't connect those changes to what was unveiled last week because nobody will explain that connection to her. That's where we come in. That's why this conversation, this community, this movement matters so much, because information is power. And right now, the people who want to reshape America are counting on most Americans remaining uninformed about what's really happening. Dr. Santos sent me research showing how similar transformations have played out in other countries. The pattern is always the same. First, you change the rules quietly, then you implement the changes gradually. Finally, you normalize the new system by making it seem like this is just how things work now. By the time people realize what they've lost, the mechanisms for getting it back have been fundamentally altered. But here's what gives me hope. Every time this pattern has been attempted in a democracy, it has only succeeded when citizens remained passive, when they trusted others to protect their interests, when they assumed someone else would sound the alarm. We're sounding the alarm now. We're refusing to be passive. We're taking responsibility for protecting our own interests and the interests of our children. I received another call yesterday, this time from someone I'll call Michael. He works in a government agency that most Americans have never heard of, but which affects their lives in countless ways. Michael told me that last week's unveiled power includes the ability to reorganize these agencies, to redirect their missions, to fundamentally alter how they serve the public. Michael shared with me an internal memo that outlines plans for his agency over the next 6 months. The changes described in that memo would affect everything from food safety inspections to environmental monitoring to consumer protection, but none of these changes require new legislation. They're all being implemented through the power that was unveiled last week. The scariest part, Michael told me, is how normal they're making it all seem. Like these are just routine adjustments to improve government operations. But when you read between the lines, when you understand how all these changes connect, you realize that essential protections Americans have relied on for decades are being quietly dismantled. I asked Michael what motivated him to reach out to me, to risk his career by sharing this information. His answer was simple: I have children too, and I want them to grow up in a country where government serves the people, not the other way around. That's what this is really about, friends. It's about the country our children will inherit. It's about whether the next generation will enjoy the same rights, the same protections, the same democratic voice that we've taken for granted. The power unveiled last week makes it possible to reshape American society without ever having to win the messy, difficult democratic debate about whether that's what Americans actually want. It bypasses the need for public conversation, for legislative compromise, for constitutional amendment. It simply imposes change through administrative authority that most people don't understand and can't effectively challenge. I think about the civil rights movement, about the suffrage movement, about all the times in American history when ordinary citizens had to fight for democracy against forces that wanted to limit it. Those movements succeeded because people understood what was at stake, because they organized, because they refused to accept that change was impossible. We're living in one of those moments again. The tactics are different, more sophisticated, more hidden, but the fundamental challenge is the same. Will we allow power to be concentrated in ways that serve the powerful, or will we insist that democracy serves the people? I've been asking myself what my parents would think about what's happening today. They lived through times when democracy was under open attack, when the threats were obvious and the choices were clear. I think they would recognize in our current moment the same kind of test that every generation faces, the test of whether we care enough about freedom to fight for it when it's not easy, when it's not convenient, when the threats aren't obvious to everyone. The people who unveiled this new power are counting on us, failing that test. They're counting on us being too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed by our daily lives to pay attention to what they're doing to our collective future. But they're wrong about us. They're wrong about the American people. They're wrong about what happens when citizens understand what's at stake and decide to fight back. Every person watching this video, every person who subscribes to this channel, every person who shares this message with someone who needs to hear it, you're proving them wrong. You're showing that democracy still has defenders. You're demonstrating that the truth, when it's spoken clearly and courageously, is more powerful than all their careful planning and sophisticated manipulation. David, Dr. Santos, Judge Williams, Michael, all the people who risked everything to make sure you understand what's happening, they did it because they believe in you. They believe in us. They believe that when Americans know the truth, they act on it. So here's what I'm asking of you. First, stay informed. Subscribe to channels like this one that tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Second, stay engaged. Talk to your family, your friends, your neighbors about what you've learned today. Third, stay active. Vote in every election, contact your representatives, make your voice heard. And finally, stay hopeful, because even with everything we're facing, even with all the challenges ahead, we still have the power to write a different ending to this story. We still have the ability to demand accountability, to insist on transparency, to protect the democratic principles that make America a beacon of hope for the world. The power that was unveiled last week is real. The threat to democracy is serious, but so are we. So is our commitment to freedom. So is our determination to leave our children a country where their voices matter, where their rights are protected, where their government serves them instead of ruling them. That's the America worth fighting for. That's the future worth protecting. And that's the work that starts right now, right here, with each of us deciding that democracy is worth defending. Subscribe now. Share this message, join this community, because the future depends on citizens who understand what's happening and refuse to let it happen without a fight. Together, we can ensure that government of the people, by the people, and for the people does not perish from this earth. But before you go, there's one more thing David told me that I can't get out of my mind. He said that in all his years of government service through multiple administrations, he had never seen anything planned with such precision, such attention to timing, such understanding of how to change